Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a real pleasure to be kicking off the day, if not a slightly nerve-wracking, having travelled all the way from York this morning. But I shall... That's just the introduction slide. I'll get on to the meaty substance, which is the actual problems that we're facing with stained glass windows. In the top right image, that's a picture of Solomon from St. Mary's Church, Fairford. It's a tracing done by the Reverend Joyce in 1870. And 100 years later, at Fairford, this is the actual glass. So it had survived for 300 years almost in a pristine condition. And then in this last century, since the Industrial Revolution, and the output of atmospheric pollution, it has deteriorated and lost its paint pigment. Now, stained glass, and glass in general, is a fragile medium, and barring catastrophe, its durability is taken for granted. However, in the presence of moisture, particularly rain on the outside, which can damage the actual glass itself, depending on its chemical composition, or more importantly, condensation on the inside surface of the stained glass has been damaging the paintwork. And since the Industrial Revolution, there have been deposits, which I always describe as being like blotting paper, that takes on the condensation and holds it on the surface for a longer period of time than in previous centuries. And in turn, this chemical reaction with the water has created this. So, as Jamie said in his introduction, I was very interested, and when I was an apprentice at York Minster, I heard about this new isothermal glazing system that had been discovered in Europe. That other slide on the previous one was when I was awarded my fellowship, and Have Ladder would travel. Despite the importance of what I was going to do, the local press thought, I'm going to raise the eyebrows of customs and excise people in all the countries because I went with my ladders on top so I could get into these churches and buildings and put my ladder up and get at close quarters and see the nuts and bolts of how everything had been put together. Now, the discovery of isothermal glazing is in Bernmunster, this windows here. Now, like most countries, and Switzerland once alone, they took their windows out during the Second World War for safety. And we did in England as well, our precious stained glass windows. But they had the idea, if there's another world war, we don't want all this hammer and chisel and let's get all these windows out again. So they thought of a simpler way of actually removing their windows. So in the rectangular sections of these main lights in the windows in the apse, they put them into metal frames and hung them in front of the opening. And some 20 years later, people were looking at these windows and looking at comparing those shaped heads at the top of those rectangles and the traceries, those shapes right at the top, which had been put directly back into their environmental situation, into their glazing grooves. And there was a marked difference in the actual condition after 20 years between the two. So hence, isothermal glazing was discovered. And the principle is, as you can see on the diagrams there, you actually remove the stained glass from its glazing groove. You put in a new layer of outer protective glazing. You put your stained glass into frames and hang it as a picture in front of the opening. And you allow ventilation at the bottom of the window and ventilation at the top. And this allows the air from within the building to pass into the interspace and through the window. And because the air is of equal temperature, it keeps the glass dry. So now, this is the best way of protecting stained glass. This was one of my first projects, having returned from my fellowship. And I must confess, it has taken between 10 to 20 years to actually get this system approved and accepted. Nobody likes change. practitioners making stained glass windows. This was a new idea. Put stained glass into frames. Well, we've never done that before, you know. Ooh. So everyone was against it because they didn't know what to do or how to do it. So I encouraged my fellow practitioners within my profession to, you know, come along to master classes, and I gave lectures and talks, and then offered the service of actually creating and making the frames for them, so that it sort of took that fear out from them. They were sort of more at ease with actually accepting something new. And certainly architects were very against it, you know, saying, well, this is changing the architectural appearance of the building. So we're looking at new ways of having the outer protective glazing, you know, be more aesthetically pleasing. And there's always different solutions for different buildings. Anyway, this is Stamford-on-Avon Church in Northamptonshire. It's on the Northamptonshire border. And we've conserved all 13 windows. Majority of the glass dates from the 14th century, but there's 15th century and 16th century. And this wonderful figure on your left of St. Peter is absolutely remarkable because it still retains its original medieval leading from 1325. So by introducing these isothermal systems and removing the stained glass from its practical functions as a climatic barrier, we're able not only to conserve the glass, but also original leadwork, and this is exceptionally rare. And I just threw this little image in because this is a unique image in stained glass, and it's idle gossips. So you've got three ladies in the centre with their rosary. They should be devoutly at prayer, but they're talking about Crossroads and EastEnders and Coronation Street, and a host of demons will come and consume you. So this was placed above the lectern where the preacher was giving his sermon. So this is the only depiction in stained glass. Now these systems are not only in parish churches, numerous parish churches, but we've also got them in stately homes, Longleat House, Blickling Hall, as you can see here. This is Continental glass from the Abbey of Steinfeld, now protected in the system. And this is a church not far from here, and I urge any of you, if you are, you know, it's quite local to here, St. Mary's Church, Fairford, on the road between Cirencester and Lechlade. It's the only church in the country that has retained all its late medieval stained glass. So despite the Reformation, despite Puritanism, it has all 28 windows, and they're masterpieces of early Renaissance glass. And we've actually completed this in about 2010 after a 20-year program. So there's lots of parish churches as well. And I'll just show you a little insight into what happens in our studio. You can see on your bottom left, that's our glazing room, and the glaziers putting new outside leads and cleaning. And the one immediately above is our conservation room where we do the cleaning, edge bonding, back painting. Top right, our viewing gallery, so we can see this wonderful Renaissance glass from Lichfield Cathedral that we've just completed this year. And then down at the bottom, the engineering room, this new addition to the stained glass craft. And you can see the windows being put into their isothermal frames. And the frames we use are manganese bronze, because it has a copper content and we'll bend them around the most complex of shapes. So this was what we completed. And this is glass actually not from England, but from Belgium. And it was from the Abbey of Herkenrode near Liège, and was bought by Sir Brooke Bruby in 1802 and put into Lichfield Cathedral. And it's the most complete collection. There's more 16th century stained glass in these windows than there is in Belgium. So that's the remarkable. But you can find, we've done it in Durham Cathedral, Ely Cathedral, there's Salisbury, York Minster, Canterbury. All the cathedrals have now got this isothermal system in. And it's even expanded now, I'm pleased to say, into considering for actual new stained glass windows. And this is a new window by Helen Whittaker from our studio. And so new windows are actually being put into the system. So we've got outer protective glazing, keeping out not only the weather, but also acting as a mechanical barrier as well, because this is laminated glass. And it's spreading worldwide. So we've now actually going over to America. I'm advising at St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is English glass in the Museum of Fine Art at Boston, and this is glass from Hampton Court. We're also doing stained glass in Sweden, and the whole of the message, and now the international community and their guidelines for preventative conservation of stained glass, isothermal glazing is number one. And I'm very pleased to say that, you know, without the fellowship and bringing all the best ideas I saw in Europe, combining them and making a new system, because it was only as good as any four people together could decide. So bringing in all the best ideas and then gathering them together, making something, and then spreading it back out, and now it's been used throughout Europe and throughout the world. So thank you very much indeed.